Welcome to our Level Up series. And when I was looking at Level Up and all the graphics around it, I kept thinking about myself and Super Mario Brothers. Who played Super Mario Brothers out there? I used to love that game. And then the video game that I feel like is to some degree my life is Tetris. Because it's like all these things raining down and like, where do I put them? And then it goes faster and faster and faster. And it feels so good when something fits and the row goes away. So that's what some of this, there's a lot of nostalgia associated with Level Up. But hey, I am excited for the next little bit to level up together. That's what this is about, knowledge sharing and learning from each other. And so I believe we're just going to start out with some basics. And so who better to like lay down the basics than Carrie Cunningham. And so most of this is going to be Carrie. We were joking earlier. He's the cupcake. I'm just some sprinkles here and there. But Carrie's going to go through some pretty important research for what's happening and like how B2B buyers buy. And I think when you think about ABM, what I like to tell people is whether or not you do ABM, you live in an ABM world because of the way buyers buy. So you can choose to participate and understand the game that's happening around you, or you can just be in the middle of the field getting hit by the ball. And I think that that's what we're going to talk about now is just what is the game we're playing and helping you guys understand that, because the better we understand that, honestly, the better we can design our strategy, our technology, our processes, and our tactics. So let's get into it.
All right, let's jump into this. What do you say?
Go. Let's go.
All right, good stuff. You want to take designing?
Yeah. So let's just start out with, if you're not familiar with Sixth Sense, I like to just start out with our founding. So our founders, like every single one of you, were in B2B. They were B2B sales and marketers, and they realized it was really hard. And they realized that they were wasting a lot of time and money and energy because they just didn't know who was ready to buy what they were selling. And so they thought, wow, wouldn't B2B marketing and sales be so much easier if we just knew who was ready to buy our product? And it sounds like a pretty no-brainer question to ask. It's very difficult to answer. But that was the big idea that founded Sixth Sense. And since then, we've gone on to answer that question and a lot more really critical questions that I think you have to know today to be able to just survive. So which accounts, right? It's an account-based world. What are the accounts that are the best fit for us? Which ones are we going to be the most successful selling to as well as servicing? When? That was that original question. When are they ready? When is the right time for sales to reach out versus when is the right time for marketing to run programs against? Who? It's great to know this account is awesome for us and they're ready to buy. But guess what? As marketers and sellers out there, you got to connect with a person, or in this world, people. So who are the actual people, the right contacts to go and reach out to? And then with so much noise out there, you got to know what to say. You got to understand their behavior. And so you can have a relevant message that hits them, on that right channel. And so these are the questions that we've gone on to answer and ultimately orchestrate with our platform. And so that's just a little bit about Sixth Sense and the data and the technology that we provide our customers.
And we're going to touch on a lot of that now, starting now. So in the rest of the session, we'll talk about, what is ABM, and I'm probably going to get some nasty messages from a couple of my former colleagues, because I'm not using the same definition we used at Serious Decisions and Forrester exactly. But I think this is really, really functional and relevant for you all. Then we're going to play a little game. We'll play a game to understand whether doing ABM is the right thing for you. We'll look at whether or not companies are actually doing this stuff and to what extent they're doing it. And then we'll talk about what we think of as the 5 steps that help you get onto the right path for identifying the right accounts and answering all those questions that Latany just talked about. So with that, let's get to the definition of account-based. So account-based go-to-market strategy is one where, first of all, no matter what, you come to an agreement with sales about the audience that you're going after. So the accounts come first, understanding the accounts and the segments where you're likely to be most successful. You can define that a lot of different ways, but it's absolutely critical that you do that. And the most important thing is that you and sales and the customer team are on the same page about that. You can be right if you're in marketing, you can be right about what the best accounts are, but if sales doesn't agree with you, you're not right. And you have to work that out. And then the same goes for the buyer personas. You've got to know who the right people to be talking to are. And one of the things that we'll talk about today is just how important the buying group is. There's an average of 10 people involved in that. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So that next point, engage buying groups and not just individuals. This has been the single biggest flaw in most account-based approaches to date, is we do an account-based approach and then we just look at leads. That doesn't work very well. We've been wasting a lot of time and money not looking after buying groups. We'll talk about that some more as well. Then you got to create tactics and offers that are specific to the audiences you serve and ideally specific to where they are in the buying journey, right? So you have the right kinds of things to say to them, just like Latany was talking about a second ago. And then we're going to set goals and measure progress against opportunities and against the accounts that have opportunities in them and not against things that don't matter, which, as we'll talk about more, are the leads. The leads don't matter. What matters is we identify the accounts and the potential opportunities inside them. And then the last thing to say is that this can be deployed, this ABM strategy, against almost all, not quite all, but almost all B2B audiences. And so what we're going to do over the next few slides in the next few minutes is talk about how you know whether this is something that you could deploy against the audiences that you're trying to sell to. So with that, Latany, anything else there we ought to mention on the definition of account-based?
I'm a simplifier, guys. And when I talk about account-based, I just say it's about focus and it's about the entire company, not just sales and marketing, the entire company focused on the most winnable accounts and contacts. Hard stop. Many people do not nail that. You nail that, you're going to be in a better spot than 99% of the companies out there.
Yep, spot on. Cool. All right. So account-based, go or no go? What do we think? All right. So here are the rules. You're going to answer each of the questions in the game. And as you answer those questions, you're going to reward yourself some points. Write those down if you have a notepad or you take it on write it down on your computer somewhere, but you're going to add up points over the course of the game. And at the end of the game, we'll look at your points and understand whether or not an ABM approach is good for you. All right. So let's get started. And so the first thing we're going to look at is how many deals you can do in one account. Now, this may not seem like the most obvious question in the world, but when you think about the reason that you would do account-based, as Latany said, you would focus on a set of accounts, is because you think that's your best chance for getting opportunity or getting revenue in the near future. And if you're going to get revenue from them, it's either because they represent one really big deal or a couple of really big potential deals, or maybe an account represents a lot of potential opportunities for you. You have many solutions that you could sell them. So the first thing we want to look at is how many potential opportunities does an account represent for you? So think about that for your company, looking across the top line. Is it one, or is it somewhere between 2 and 10 opportunities? For some of you in larger companies, you may be able to sell them 25, 30 different things, right? Now, the next thing is look at how many accounts there are in your addressable market. Like how many different companies could you possibly sell to? And so here the numbers go from high to low, 100,000 up top and just under 100 at the bottom. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look in each one of the cells. So if you look at the top left-hand row where it says an account represents one opportunity and there's 100,000 or more accounts in our market, you get 1 point for that. And honestly, that's not a great indicator that you're going to need ABM. If you just sell them one thing and there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of companies, that's not the most ABM-ish kind of approach. But let's say that you have 3 solutions. So you're in that 2 to 10 category and your solution costs, 50,000, then you're going to come down to the third row and you're going to give yourself 8 points, right? That's a pretty good ABM scenario. So everybody do that for the next couple of seconds and then write down the number of points, and the number of points is just the number in that cell. All right, so now we're going to do something that very, very similar. This time, we're going to look at the buying group. So I mentioned buying group earlier. In B2B, the vast, vast majority of all purchase decisions are made by groups of people. And the average in B2B is 10. And the things that cause the buying group to be larger or smaller are the 2 things that we're going to look at here today. So how many competitors do you typically see in a deal? That's the biggest influence on how many people on the buying side get involved. And it just makes sense, right? If you have to evaluate 5 people, you got to have more people involved in helping evaluate them than if you evaluate just 2 competitors. The other thing, of course, that makes a big difference in how many people get involved is how expensive the thing is that you sell. So is it between 10,000 and 100,000 to acquire it, or is it over 700,000? Let us know by looking into the cells. And so, for example, if you typically see 2 competitors in a deal and your solution costs about 150,000 to acquire, you would go column 2, and then row 2, you go over, and that's that 8 in that cell. And you would give yourself 8 points. If you usually see more than 6 competitors, then, God bless you all. That's very difficult. But your solution costs more than 700,000, you would come down to the very far right of the table, and you would give yourself 10 points. All right, so find your spot. You probably already have it. And now we'll move on to the next. Keep track of your points, folks. All right, so third one, we're going to use the same 2 parameters, but this time we're looking at how long the buying cycle is. So again, these are the 2 most important. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you to talk about buying groups really quickly, because I think Leonard had a really good question about how do you identify a buying group and sort of the importance of this. So I want to add some color commentary. So I think the best way to do it, obviously, is using predictive analytics, duh. But the way that works is essentially you're going to look at all the opportunities that you win. And on those opportunities, who are the contact roles that are typically involved? Yeah. And so then you can you get a score essentially for A contacts, A grade contacts. And then you can look at those A grade contacts and say, okay, these are the roles that we need in a buying group. So that establishes like fit, right? So think of that as like the buying group fit. Then as you progress opportunities, you're going to look at buying group engagement. And the goal, of course, is to get as many engaged contacts, key contacts in that buying team as possible. Yep. And one thing that we found, which is really interesting, you guys, is we look at every single segment of our business. And again, the deals that we win, and we see a huge difference in winning when we have a certain number of engaged contacts. So let me break this down for you. In our commercial segment, these are the smaller accounts. If we have 6 engaged contacts on a deal versus 3, we win 50% more. In enterprise, if we have 10 engaged contacts versus 6, 50% increase in win rate. In strat, the magic number is to get to 13, from 10 to 13. And so what I love about this, y'all, is this is controllable. It's tough out there, right? The market conditions are tough, this, that, and the other. So I'm always looking for what are patterns that we can actually control. And I think the buying group and understanding your buying group size and who they are and making sure they're getting engaged is something very controllable across the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, and not only that, when you're think about what's going to happen if you do ABM and you focus your attention on a smaller number of companies, but you really apply your attention against them. What's going to happen? Well, unless you're really bad at it, more of those people are going to come to your website, right? More of those people are going to fill out forms to see events and things, and more people are going to consume content anonymously. So it's really, really important to learn the kinds of things that Latney just said about your own buyers, and to understand how many people come to your website in the course of a buying process. So our research shows that the average buying team is about 10, which is probably about the average of what Latney was talking about if you take all of those different segments, and that all 10 of those people come to your website and they have, on average, 160 different interactions with you during their buying process. So that buying team is on your website, they're chewing up content, they're looking at your videos, all of those things. And that's the best way to see whether they're engaging, as Latney said. So really, really important. If you're looking for just leads, you're going to miss all of that. You won't see any of it. And most of the good work that you've done to generate that engagement, you're just not going to see it. You're going to miss it all. All right, great points, Latney. All right, so how long is the buying cycle for your stuff? So this is also really important. We tend to think of the buying cycle and the sales cycle as the same thing, but they're really, really not. So the research shows that buyers engage with sellers only about 70% of the way through their journey. So if the average journey in B2B is about 11 months, which it is, buyers are engaging with sellers 8 months into that buying journey. So you may see a 3 or 4 month process. Your buyers have been in market for a really long time prior to that. And one of the most important things you can do to be effective is to see the beginning of those buying journeys and to ensure that you get a chance to put your best foot forward in those accounts before they get to the point where they're talking to you. So these are actual numbers. And so we want to look at, again, how many competitors are you looking at? That really drives the length of the cycle. If you're competing with 3 or 4 or 5 other vendors, you're going to be in long cycles, long buying cycles, because it's very complicated for your buyers to make decisions that way. And of course, deal size. Bigger deals take a longer time for your buyers to figure out and to make decisions on. So as an example, if you typically see 3 or 4 competitors in a deal and your solution costs $300, you would come down to this cell here that says 3 or 4 competitors and 300 and 1,500, and you would see a cycle length of about 10 months on average. And that's the buying cycle, right? Now, it could be longer in your case, but this is the average. So what I want you to do is come down and find out what this is for you. If you have more than 6 competitors and a $700,000 solution, your buyer has a 23-month buying cycle. So you're going to find your points.
This was a fast-moving deal, and it came inbound. And I had 3 calls and closed it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, because they came inbound after they had already decided they wanted to buy from you, is what was happening. And so the way that it works, according to the research, is buyers are going to do their research. They've got to come to consensus as a buying team, as that big buying group. And it takes them a long time to do that. By the way, they don't want to talk to you until they've really put that consensus together. But when they do, when they reach out and say, hey, I want to talk to you, that means that they pretty much already decided, and now they're validating their decision. And so you're going to have a nice short sales cycle that maybe you're going to win or maybe not, but they probably already decided.
So pro tip for those of y'all out there. What's challenging about this is a lot of the buying cycle you don't see, right? And that's why I made that joke. They came inbound and I had 2 calls and they closed. What are you talking about? What did marketing do, right? And I think as marketers, it's really, it becomes more and more difficult to show like the fruits of our labor, so to speak, the longer the buying cycle is. So one of the things that I love to do is I take all of the deals that we won and I bring them back into 6 Sense so I can see the average activity in the dark funnel.
Looking back over time to see what all of that behavior was.
Exactly. So then I can say, fun fact, it takes 35 visits to the website to land a commercial deal and 95 for an enterprise deal.
Yeah.
And guess what? They engage in 20 campaigns. And so it starts to help people see the magnitude of everything that's happening to win a deal. And then the other thing I think that is great is in QBRs, salespeople don't think they think in terms of a deal. So bring up a typical deal that you won and be able to show they were researching all these intent keywords. They attended this webinar. They visited these pages on the website. It just helps expose the entire organization to really what's happening in your cycles, because typically people only see their own little keyhole.
Yeah, super important. And as Atney said, there are a couple of ways that you can do that pretty simply. I mean, at the very least, go look in your leads data today, go look in marketing automation, and take a random 100 or 200 leads and look at how many unique companies are in there. What you're going to find is that if you have 100 leads, there's probably not more than 60, 65 companies. And about half of those only have one lead. The other half have 3, 4, 5 leads with you. Those are the guys that we should be focusing on. Those are the accounts that are really in market for your stuff. And we need to make sure that we see that every time. Now, when they come and they knock on your door and say, I want to have a meeting with you, that's awesome. But that is an indication to you that you missed most of the buying journey and you're just catching them at the end. And you can only hope that they already like you and want to buy from you. All right, so now we're going to look exactly at the thing that we were just talking about, which is how many interactions does a buying group have across their journey? Because this number becomes pretty staggering. So what we're looking at right now are the numbers that an individual person has across their buying journey. So again, looking at the number of competitors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the size of the buying group, which we figured out earlier. And you'll find your cell and pick the number. Now, just a word on the competitors and the importance of competitors, and maybe a little pro tip about how we enable our buyers. It looks like your buyers are having about 4,000 total interactions as a buying group across their buying journey, just in an average B2B buying journey. And what I would say about that is it's way, way, way too much, right? Buyers should not have to have 4,000 interactions and download 3,000 pieces of content in order to choose a vendor. But right now they do. And one of the reasons that they do is because as marketers, we tend to differentiate our brands based on not what they do, but how we talk about what they do. We make up words, we make up language to describe what our solutions do. And when you do that, it makes it very, very difficult for buyers to compare you to the other guys. And that's what they have to do. And they're going to do it. So the harder it is, the longer it's going to take. And to give you an example, the average buying group is looking at 4 vendors in B2B. And that buying process takes 11 months and has 4,000 interactions. If you add 1 vendor to that, so if a buying group looks at 5 vendors instead of 4, they add 2 people to the buying group, that buying process is going to take 13 and a half months instead of 11. And the buying group is going to have 8,000 total interactions instead of 4. Almost double their work by adding 1 vendor because it's so hard to compare. So public service announcement, make it easy for your buyers to understand how you compare to your competitors and differentiate on what you do, not how you talk about what you do. But for now, what we want you to do is identify where you sit in this chart and say, all right, so if I've got 3 to 4 competitors and I've got a buying group of 10 or 12, each person on my buying group is going to have 16 interactions. I got 11, that's 176 or whatever the number that is. Do the math. And that's what your score is going to be based on. So take your number, if it's 16, and you go down to the line across the bottom and find yourself on the top line, 16, and then just go to the next one and give yourself, in that case, 4 points. All right, so we're almost done with the heavy math portion of the presentation, but there's a couple of other things that we're going to handle a little bit differently. So have your scores all tallied up right now. Now I want to describe what I like to call defensive buyer syndrome. So here are some stats about buying today. Here's what we know. First, there's a 3% form fill rate in B2B. It's been that way for 10 or 12 years. 3% of the people who come to your website are going to fill out a form. Now, you may say, so what? Most of those people aren't buyers, and you're right. But when you look at the people who are actually part of active buying groups who are evaluating you against somebody else, only 2 out of 10 of those people, so the typical buying group of 10, only 2 of those people are going to fill out a form. So if your content is behind a form, 8 of the 10 people that you want to influence are not going to see it, or they're going to have to ask somebody else to show it to them. So I call that defensive buyer syndrome, because they know what's going to happen when they fill out a form, which is you're going to hound them to death. They're not going to be ready for that. The other thing is a stat I mentioned a minute ago. We know that buyers say that they do not engage with sellers until 70% of the way through the journey. So to me, this is all a defensive buyer. This is a buyer who doesn't want to be sold. They don't want to be attacked. They want to make a decision on their own. And what we have to do is we have to enable them. But the biggest defensive buying stat is this one. Buyers tell us that 83% of the time when they have their first interaction with a seller, they initiate that contact. So what this tells us is they don't talk to you till 70% of the way through. They control when that happens very, very closely. That is a defensive buyer. That is a buyer that says, no, we're gonna engage when we're ready and if we're ready. And if you're on the list by the time we get ready.
So I don't know about you guys out there, and gals, but I am not a defensive player. I am an offensive player. And despite defensive buyer syndrome, there are things that we can do. They look differently, though, than what we were doing before.
Right.
What do I mean by that? So when we talk about them not filling out a form and ungating your content or the educational content, the first instinct is, oh my God, I need those contacts. I need those leads. So, and when you pass a high intent account to sales, they're like, what do I do with this? I'm used to getting an email, So what you want to do is you want to make sure you have a very good data management, data orchestration process, so that when you identify an account that is showing intent and is on your website, you can enrich that account with the buying team, not just one contact, right? But the entire buying team. And then you start to work that entire buying team. So just because they're defensive doesn't mean that we can't play offense. We just need to know how and how to play that game a little bit better. The other thing is, I still have people that say, Latney, we get people that request meetings and request demos, and it takes us a day or 2 or even a week to respond. Guys, that is unacceptable, right? And so, as we think about that, like there is a new future with AI agents. One of them, 6 Sense provides. So we provide an AI agent now. So you can follow up in real time with amazing messaging. You can also follow up on those if your sales team is not following up on those high intent accounts in a timely fashion, that's okay. AI is to the point now, the AI agents, our product conversational email is to the point where you don't need a human to follow up. Like you can go ahead and use that agent to make sure that you're not just waiting, and you can be that first vendor that speaks that speaks to the in-market account or in-market contact.
Yep. It's really, really important that everybody understand this doesn't mean you don't try. What this means is you do have to try differently. And we'll talk about what different means right now, because that's only one of the syndromes. The other syndrome I call empowered buyer syndrome. So buyers are defensive, but they're partly defensive because they got a pretty good idea that they can learn what they need to learn about you without talking to you first. So first thing is, we know that only about 17% of the buying journey happens on vendor websites. So they're doing most of their shopping somewhere other than on your website, right? So you might see 160, 200 interactions from a buying team. That's a small fraction of what they're doing overall. We know, as I said, the buying team is having about 4,000 total interactions, and you may see 150 or so of those. Latney said for us, it goes like what was that, 65, 95, something like that. So there are a lot of interactions that they're having outside of your domain. And then here's the other thing. Buyers use outside resources. They get help. They phone a friend when they are in buying mode, and they're gonna be getting a lot of information about you and your solutions without talking to you. But here's the number that is the single biggest indicator of a buyer that feels empowered. 84% of the time, buyers say that they have picked a winner before they talk to sales. So, if you haven't heard that number yet, let that sink in a little bit. Buyers have been in market for 8 months before they talk to you. They've been looking around. They've had 4,000 plus interactions. They have come to a consensus as a team about which vendors are on the short list. And of course, they put one on the top. And just like the rest of us do when we're buying a car or looking at houses or something like that, we got a favorite and we start there. And we hope we don't have to change our mind, right? We hope that that's the one that we're going to buy. And 84% of the time in B2B, it is, right? So you have to see, like, the big message everybody's got to take away is you've got to see that whole buying journey, that the 3,000 something interactions that are taking place outside of your website and away from your events. You've got to see those and be very, very effective in getting the right message in front of the right people at the right time when they're not on your website and you're not talking to them yet. Like, this is the single most important thing I think there is to know about B2B marketing and selling today, is you have to be very effective at selling without having the ability to talk to them. And I want to say this as well, because a lot of times when I say this to sales folks, they go, wait a minute, does that mean we don't matter? No, it absolutely doesn't mean that. Especially for kind of strategic accounts, enterprise accounts, great sales reps are always in those accounts, building relationships, establishing who decision makers are for the various solutions that you have, putting yourself in a position where you're a trusted resource for those buyers. And then the other thing you're doing is you're enabling those buyers. You're not making every call or every email about, can I get a demo and can I get a meeting? You're inviting them to events. You're making sure that they're included when you have important events. You're looking at the content that they've consumed as a team so far, and you're making sure they get the next best thing. You're not waiting for them to come to your website. You're going out and proactively making sure that that team has what they need. So it's absolutely critical that you don't look at this and say, oh no, we'll just sit back and wait to see what happens. It's just the opposite of that. Anything you want to add there, Latney?
No. Awesome.
So everybody gets 10 points for defensive buyer syndrome. Everybody gets 10 points for empowered buyer syndrome. These are real. Your buyers are exactly like this. We've just, we got this data in a study we did last summer with 900 responses. We just replicated that study this year across the globe with 2,500 more responses. And what we got was the exact same result. This is what buying is like in B2B. And it's why we have to be able to see the entire buying journey. All right. So I hope everybody's added up their points. How many points do you all have? I'd love to hear that in the chat. 61, if you don't count the choose a favorite thing. Well, you better count the choose a favorite thing. 51, 61. Nobody's reached out to us yet. So yeah, I think virtually everybody, you're going to find yourself at 60 plus points, unless you sell really small things to hundreds of thousands of companies, in which case you've got another kind of deal going. All right. So I hope it's clear to everybody that this approach, you don't even have to call it ABM, but what you do have to do is make sure that you see the buying group, you see the entire buying journey, and you respond to those buyers in a way that you're enabling them prior to the time they're picking favorites. All right. So now I want to talk a little bit about adoption, because a lot of people might be thinking, okay, that sounds great, but is anybody really doing this stuff and does it work? Well, here's what we know so far. So we've done a bunch of surveys over the last year and a half or so, where we asked the question, are you or do you have an account-based practice, or at least a highly targeted account practice in your organization? And the large majority of organizations today already do. Between 60 and 70% of organizations have an account-based practice in their company right now. If you don't, you're behind. and you need to catch up, right? If you do, and it's small, it's a small niche part of your organization, I hope what you saw today and what you're hearing today will help you understand that this approach is not an approach that is designed for a small niche set of accounts in your company. This is how you ought to be going to market in B2B. Next, if you're going out and focusing on a set of accounts, we already talked about the fact that you've got a big buying group. They're all going to show up and do some of their own research. So our organization's adopting the practices that allow them to see buying groups. We asked this question in a survey we did just a couple of months ago. And the answer is that 72% of marketers today say that they see and prioritize buying groups over leads. In other words, if you get 3 people from the same organization show up on your website looking at the same content, do you behave differently? Does your sales team respond differently to that? Do you respond differently to that? So the answer so far, 72% of organizations say that they do. That's phenomenal. That number would have been
I don't think
in
that's true.
You think people are shining us on a little bit?
I do. I think that's like I think that we all know and we say in our minds, yes, we do that. Yeah. But what I see day in and day out talking with folks in the real world and what's really happening, everybody still wants an inbound. Everybody wants an inbound. Where's my inbounds? Where's my inbounds? And so we can beat ourselves till we're blue in the face saying, no, we have all these qualified accounts, blah, 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 blah. And the process for passing inbound hasn't evolved, in my opinion.
Hasn't changed.
And so, like, pro tip here, we opened up and we said that ABM is about focus. And so to me, it's as much who you focus on as who you don't focus on. And so what I think, if you're very savvy at this, you should have a process for low fit leads that make sure you don't, yes, they've come inbound, but they're low fit. So make sure you have a process for low fit leads that does not require a ton of work, because those are not even the accounts you maybe want to sell to. And then even when a lead comes in, make sure that you have a process that multi-threads. So take that lead as an opportunity to reach out to other people. And so that should be in your SLA for how you respond to a lead.
Yeah, and that's the absolute. So if you think about this as a value chain. So first of all, you go out, you target a set of accounts, you focus on them, you drive demand inside those accounts. You have to notice when it shows up on your website, and that's what we just looked at. I think those numbers may be high, but what at least is very encouraging to me is most people know that they should be seeing buying groups and responding to them at the very least. And then the next chain is, if you're seeing multiple people, you've got a multi-thread on your way in. So in our survey of BDRs last year, in our benchmark report on BDRs, we found 83% of BDRs say that they reach out to at least 6 different people when they're working a lead. This is not outbound, but this is following up on a lead. Now, I think 6 is too much for most folks. You probably don't need 6 for one, but if you're a big enterprise solution, then that's probably a pretty good number. What's really important you take away from this is you should be multi-threading every time. I wrote a brief about this in 2018 for Serious Decisions that said you should never, ever follow up on a lead again unless you're willing to multi-thread into that account. If you're not willing to call multiple people inside that account, it is not a good enough lead to follow up on at all, except by using conversational email to do that work for you. Right? So with conversational email, you don't have to worry about missing out on that one special bluebird. You can absolutely get them all covered, and you should do that. Every organization in B2B should be doing that with every lead. Make sure they all get followed up. But your human beings should only be following up with a lead when that lead is worth multi-threading to. And if it isn't, don't do it, right? So if you're not doing this today, you are falling behind. This is something that I talk to tons and tons of organizations, and most know that they at least know that they have to multi-thread. And I think most are multi-threading to at least a couple of folks now on their inbound lead side. All right, so super important. So we've got focusing on accounts and driving more engagement. We've got noticing when that engagement happens and you get multiple leads. We've got multi-threading against those multiple leads. But here's something where most organizations lose the plot. If your BDRs are multi-threading, you've got a lot of engagement from the account. Your BDRs try to reach 3 or 4 or 5 different people in the account. Of course, they get one of them, right? They don't reach all the other ones, but they get one. They talk to that one, and if they're doing their job right, they're saying, hey, are these other guys involved in this project too? Oh, they are. Great. Okay. Now you've got that intelligence. And then if what you do is you pass that one person you talk to as a lead to sales, you're going to lose all of the evidence about how you got there. The sales rep is not going to see that you had these other engaged contacts. You're not going to, when you go back and do attribution, which we'll talk about in a minute, you're not going to see that you had these engaged contacts. You're not going to understand how this deal came to be. So, like I've been talking about this for years, but again, what we want BDRs to be doing is bundling those contacts that they've been multi-threading to onto an opportunity and pass that stage 0 opportunity off to sales, not a lead. And now for most of you, you might be thinking, oh, okay, but I'll use the account object. That's fine. If you sell one thing, you can do that, right? But if you sell 2 things, you can't do that anymore, right? Because now you're going to be very confused if you have 2 different opportunities going and they're just all that information's on the account object. So very technical. We're down to kind of nuts and bolts things, but it's really important that we utilize that opportunity object to keep a record for marketing of how we got here and to have a record for sales of who all the people that have been engaging are. All right. So this is a really good value chain, and we're seeing a lot of progress. Now we get to attribution, and we could talk about this for days, and I do. But here's the good news. First and last touch, you see, are now used less often than multi-touch. And the statistical approach for identifying how you got your deals is increasing. This is good news. First and last touch attribution are in the title of a presentation I did back at Forrester, your pathway to irrelevance if you're a marketer. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're doing first and last touch, my former colleagues have since said lead-based attribution is a mechanism to get a CMO fired. And I think that's also true, right? If what you're doing is you're placing the value of marketing's contribution to revenue on whether you got a lead that found its way onto the opportunity, you're going to be in big trouble. And you've seen, a buying group is 10 people at least. It's having hundreds of interactions with you across their buying journey. So picking one of those out, or even picking 3 or 4 of those out and saying, that's the one that we're going to put value on. Now, it's interesting to know, you should be looking at it, but you cannot base marketing's value on first and last touch attribution. All right. So how do we get started? To go through this, I think, Latney, I think we can kind of cover this together. This is a very simple 5-step process. And I think the simplicity of this is the beauty of it, because this is the right order of things that you need to be doing. So first, you got to select the best accounts. Right? We talked about that at first. If you don't agree on what those accounts are with sales, it doesn't matter if you think you picked the best ones. They have to be the best ones that you agree on with sales. Second, you've got to know everything about them. So all of the things that we just talked about, all of the intent signals, the traffic on your website, what are the things that they're looking at on your website? What haven't they looked at on your website? It's really, really important that you know everything about which accounts you want to be talking to and the people inside those accounts that you need to be talking to as well. Third, engage the right way. So the only way you can engage the right way is if you know everything about them, right? So that's why that one comes before this one. So you've got to use all of the intelligence you have about the account and about that buying group to target them with the right message, to hit them with the message at the right time. And I think what we really need to be thinking about is, how do you enable that buying team to make a decision and to prefer you? And everything you do should be about helping that buying team make a decision and to prefer you, if you're the right fit, right? And if you've done your job on the way here, you will be. Collaborate with sales. So we already talked about this a little bit. Collaborating with sales doesn't mean agreeing on the set of accounts and then that's that until you pass off a lead. You've got to be in lockstep throughout. I think 6 Sense is another great example of collaboration between marketing and sales. There's very, very little difference between how marketing thinks about accounts and people and how sales thinks about accounts and people inside 6 Sense, right? We're all focused on the exact same idea, which is identify those opportunities and move them through the process. Anything you want to add there, Latney?
So here's the thing. The more collaborate with sales is the same process every single time, the better. And so we talked about the definition of an SLA earlier in the chat. You know, what doesn't work is, oh, here's this campaign, here's what you do. Here's this campaign, here's what you do. Then it's all just white noise. So what you want is every campaign somewhat ends in the same SLA for what sales does, right? So, and that's really important. So like in our world, we can be doing, they don't care if it's a webinar or if it's a field event or if it's, you know, a content blitz or if it's a social storm. Sales does not care. All they care about is the account has reached the intent score that it needs to be at. And so I do the same 10 steps every time. And so that's really important. Like the collaborate with sales actually shouldn't change based on the campaign, whereas these other things do.
Yeah. That's really important. I mean, I think I've spent most of my career right between marketing and sales, and having that handoff and the next actions be as simple and consistent as possible really, really is important, because sales has to deal with so many variables in every account and every process. Getting that to be as simple and consistent as possible is absolutely critical. And then the last point, and you know, in some ways, maybe even the most important one, is track real stuff. And so I would say when I talk to customers, when I talk to prospects, marketers who aren't customers, which I do all the time, one of the biggest barriers to adopting ABM, to doing things the right way, to being successful once they have adopted ABM, is that they're stuck measuring stuff that doesn't matter anymore. That they're stuck measuring MQLs when they're doing account-based marketing, for instance. That's the biggest one. If you're measuring how many MQLs you produce and your MQL conversion, but what you're doing is you're driving engagement inside an account, you can move the MQL number without changing revenue, and you can produce a lot more revenue doing ABM without changing the MQL numbers or even seeing them get worse. Like another presentation I did a few years back on a main stage summit event was why your falling lead conversion rates are a good thing and what to do about it. And what to do about it is to stop caring about your MQL rates and start tracking stuff that actually matters. Account engagement, buying group engagement. How many, you know, Latney talked earlier, we know exactly how many contacts we have to have on an opportunity to really drive our chances of converting. That's what we need to be looking at, right? That's the kind of thing that's going to move the needle and also impress senior leadership and the board, because often they're the ones driving the MQL conversation. Once they understand that you're not generating an MQL, you're generating 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 engaged contacts inside an account, they'll understand. They'll get on board, but you have to be able to take that to them and say, this is what we're going to be looking at now.
I think the easiest way to start to make this shift is you can't go in and say, I'm not going to do leads anymore. Then they're like, cool. So what are you going to do? You know, so you can't take something away without replacing it. And so I think the easiest way to start to do this is start talking about opportunities.
Right.
Because a board, a CEO, a sales leader understands that. We understand that because we don't really want leads either. We want opportunities. And so, and an opportunity should have multiple engaged contacts on it. And so the better you kind of start to talk about opportunities, understand your sales process and the stages for moving an opportunity along and how your marketing strategy actually ties to that, then honestly, you're speaking the language of business anyway,
Right.
and you're going to be in a better spot.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so important. So what we're trying to do, and the reason that we even brought up this earlier on, is find and promote and convert and close and win opportunities. And it's opportunities that are they're the currency of B2B. And so that's what we really have to be focusing on. And what Latney said is about as important a point as you could make. You cannot just say, okay, we're not going to track MQLs anymore. Without replacing it with something that's meaningful. And that's something that's meaningful are engaged buying groups that turn into opportunities that close. That's what matters. That's what the business needs and what it's looking for. So as you walk away from this session, understand that we're not ever saying marketing is going to be not accountable or less accountable. We're going to be more accountable, but we're going to be accountable for stuff that matters. And what matters is identifying opportunities and getting them into the pipeline and getting them through. All right, we'll sum up the 5 steps so that you have them here. And we've got a ton of information about the 5 steps and then all of the research that you can see. Victoria's just put something in the chat, so you can see a link to that on our website. All of the research that we've talked about is at sixthsense.com/research. It's all there, and no surprise after what we said today, but there aren't any forms, so you can get straight there. So I want to see if we have questions, comments. Yeah, but how about, what if? There's one over in the Q&A. How do I influence my sales leaders to move to an account-based strategy? Latney, I wonder if you've ever answered this question.
So I would say, first of all, start speaking the language of opportunities, because that's what they care about. So start giving yourself like an opportunity quota, right? So, and start to understand the math in terms of this is how many opportunities we need to reach the bookings target. And so the more you are, I would say the pipelines are, because, an opportunity is really like the first step in pipeline, and for seen that way, then account-based will follow. So that's step 1. Step 2 is, one of the things that happens all the time in deal reviews is we talk about is the opportunity multi-threaded. So we talk about who's the mobilizer in this deal, who's the decision maker in this deal, what's the decision-making process, who needs to be involved. And if a salesperson is sitting there saying, well, I'm only talking to this one person, that is not a good deal. And so I would say, whether you use MedPick or whatever your sales methodology is, it definitely calls for multiple personas engaged. And so go back to that and say, here's the thing. When I just pass a lead, I'm essentially passing you a bad deal. I'm passing you a deal that probably won't close. And so what I want to do is I want to pass you an opportunity where we have a mobilizer, we have a decision maker. So the more you sort of speak in the language of the sales process, I think that will help resonate, because they don't really care about account-based marketing. Honestly, they don't. What they care about is winnable opportunities. So if you say, hey, I want to get you more winnable opportunities, and this is how I'm going to do it, that will resonate.
Great point. So there's a question about multi-threading, and I want to answer a question that came up earlier from Leonard about how do you identify buying groups. So there's 2 main things to look at. One is, how many leads do you have in the period of time from a given account? The average that we see across all of B2B, I've been looking at this for almost 10 years, is 2. But when you look at the accounts that are in market, what you're likely to see are 3 people who filled out a form. And then for every person who's filled out a form, there are 2 or 3 people on your website anonymously from that same account, at least. You have to be looking at the anonymous traffic on your website. We have the best tool for doing that. It's a huge part of the reason I'm here at 6 Cents, because that is so important. The vast majority of all the response you're ever going to see to your marketing is anonymous traffic on your website. So that's how you do that. Multi-threading.
I've got this one. So okay. Louise, this is a great question. So the longer a deal progresses, the harder it is to multi-thread because of exactly what you're saying. Like, I've been talking to this person and now they're annoyed that we're reaching out to all these other people. So this is like the argument to me for why you have to, marketing has to start multi-threading. Like, as soon as we want to go after an account, marketing needs to start multi-threading that account. Marketing needs to get multiple personas engaged. When the lead comes in, we need to get multiple meetings so that it's not, this has been going on for a long time and now we're going around the person's back. The other thing is, like, enterprise selling is a team sport. So, thinking about who else in your company can be involved in your opportunities other than just the frontline salesperson. So maybe it's their manager. Maybe it's, if you sell HR software, maybe it's your CHRO goes to their CHRO. So really orchestrating what are all of the people on their end that need to be involved and all of the people on your end that can be involved. I don't think it's 100% fair to ask the salesperson always to have some of the executive level relationships that are required. Another good example is, like, one of the things that our field marketing team has been doing is, because we have contact data in 6 Cents and we also have where the contact is located, we're taking all of our stage 1 opties and we're saying, where is the executive located? Are they in San Francisco? Are they in Atlanta? Are they in, Mississippi? I don't know. And we're saying, for all of our stage 1 opportunities, these are the hottest geos for us to set up a CRO dinner or a CMO dinner. So things like that are how you multi-thread without it feeling like you're going around someone's back.
Yeah, I love that, because one of the things that is really clear in the research is that those people are not, so the financial buyers, the really high level people involved in the purchase, they're never, ever going to fill out your form. Forget it. That's never, ever going to happen. But what they tell you when you ask them if they do their own research is yes. And in fact, in our research, very consistently, the kind of director level person who's driving the purchase has about 19 interactions on average with each vendor. And the C-level person who has to sign off on it has 14, right? It's less. Is it meaningfully less? No. They're on your website. If they're going to spend a lot of money with you and approve that, they're on your website checking you out. Also, they're not going to go to your demo, but they will go to dinner. And they will go to wine tasting, and they'll do all kinds of things with you that establish the relationship, but they're not going to get down in the weeds and go to a demo. They're never going to do that, right? But you have to know that they're there. You have to know that their team is in market. And when they are, now you can prioritize resource to have an experience, create an experience for them that is meaningful and will help build that relationship. And that's how you do it. I mean, that is how you do it.
I think we're out of time. Are we out of time?
I think we are.
I would keep going, but I think we're out of time.
I think so. Hit me up on LinkedIn. Come see our research, 6cents.com/research, and then all of the other content that we have. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Latney.